This is Behind the Headlines, with behind-the-scenes analysis on issues affecting Pennsylvanians, sponsored by the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. Now, here's your host.
Hi, from Philadelphia to Erie and from Pittsburgh to Scranton, it's Behind the Headlines. I'm Charlie Greenewalt, Senior Fellow for the Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And this week we are going to have a special installment of the Arnold Report with, of course, our chairman, Ed Arnold. Ed, welcome to the show.
Yes, sir, Charlie.
Why, today we want to focus on a special topic for the nation and for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and that's the issue of tariffs. Tariffs are talked about all the time now, and yet I believe, and I don't know if you share that belief, but most normal people have no idea what the tariffs are and how they work. So we were hoping that we could tap into your brain today and learn about tariffs. And what we've done to do this is we're simply taking questions that have been submitted by viewers during this period of time when tariffs are talked about all the time. And so we were wondering if we could please ask you to try to shed some light on these questions on tariffs.
Well, no, tariffs are basically, first of all, they're very simple. Tariffs is a tax on all goods you import. That's pretty much the simple explanation. It's a charge, and it's done in many different ways, but basically it is simply a tax on imports.
Okay, a tax on imports. Well, how much did America use tariffs in the past, Ed?
Actually, tariffs are extremely old in the world because one of the reasons for the Revolutionary War was the English put tariffs on things that were coming into America, except they collected it, we didn't collect it, and of course we had no say in it, and that's where this term taxation without representation. The taxation was tariffs.
Okay. Well, another viewer would like to know, how successful are tariffs?
Tariffs are very successful. I mean, basically, first of all, there's two kinds, but the one kind is just to raise money, which of course is what the one we talked about in the Revolutionary War, and really what we did in our country. Actually, from the founding of our country to the 30s, 85, a very high percentage, well, till I forget it was close to like 1900, 85% of our government's revenue to run the government came from tariffs, and even up to into the 30s, 50% of the revenue to run our government came from tariffs. Now again, our government was 1/100th the size of it is today, but the point is that was the main source of income in the country. So they're very old, and in this case, they supported it. There was also tariffs caused, again, in the history of America, partly a disagreement between the North and the South. So there was actually, South Carolina had seceded from the Union earlier than what forced the Civil War because of tariffs. Mm-hmm. That the South, because they exported cotton and imported just about everything else, they didn't want tariffs. The North wanted tariffs because they had industry and they wanted them protected. Mm-hmm. So again, that's the two purposes of tariff. One is to protect your internal industry, the other is to, of course, raise money. So that goes back all the way to, the early parts of our country. Examples of where it's successful, when years ago when South Korea was a fledgling little country, they wanted to protect their auto industry. So they put tariffs against other cars. Today they have two of the very successful car companies in the world. Mm-hmm. So they're basically speaking, if you want to protect one of your industries, that's the most common knowledgeable thing. And this is what they've done with America. They tax our cars anywhere in the world, and we don't sell cars overseas. We force the companies in America to build plants in their country to build cars. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of examples of where countries have to protect their to protect our industries, period, whether they're new or old, against tough competition from elsewhere.
Well, this follows what you're saying. We'll follow up with what you're saying. This viewer would like to know how successful are tariffs?
Well, as I said, there's been a lot of industries protected by the tariffs, and that's one of the really funny ones. The largest consumer, I think, per capita, which means they're really the largest consumer, India is liquor, alcohol. and they have an extremely aggressive tax. Like if a bottle would cost, an expensive bottle of whatever liquor, bourbon or something, would cost $100. If you wanted to buy it in India, it would cost $300 because not only do they have a federal tax, but they have their local governments have tremendous taxes. So basically, right now, 7 of the 10 largest liquor manufacturers in the world are in India because they obviously supply their market because the rest of the world, it's kept out. Recently, they thought they were doing us a favor, and their national federal tax, which was 200% on bourbon, they lowered it to 100%. They thought that was pretty reasonable. Again, obviously, you're not going to buy it.
Well, following up that question on how successful are tariffs, this viewer wants to know which government in the world, which government has used tariffs most successfully over time?
Well, I think I just answered. I just gave you an example of 2 of them, but really I don't think there's any one country that you can say is more successful. Basically, normally when you have a new industry, you put tariffs. I think the most common use of tariffs has always been protection, but definitely it is, again, in our case, it was a form of income, and in other countries, it still is a form of income, but most governments are so big today, tariffs couldn't possibly pay for it.
Well, this viewer would like to know how long will President Trump's tariffs be in place?
Well, the way he's proposing them now, it's like when we had the, in theory, free trade agreement, which would have been no tariffs, which of course ended up being, we don't have any tariffs, but everybody else has tariffs. That it's permanent. This is going to be done forever because the idea is that you charge me 10%, I charge you 10%. It's fair, it's reciprocal, and this is what we're going to do. And so, and in his case, he also looks at it because we could be doing up to $3-4 trillion in trade. That's $300 to $400 billion in tax. So that's part of it to help pay for our federal government.
A very difficult task, but one that he's tackled to try to restructure world trade from top to bottom. This viewer asks you, Mr. Arnold, do you personally approve of tariffs? And then the second part of the question is, do you approve of President Trump's tariffs?
The answer is, I believe that tariffs ought to be a good thing, specifically the reciprocal fair part of it. I mean, what you charge me, I should charge you. Now, again, it is extremely complicated, and as I mentioned earlier, in India, they have a tremendous amount of local taxes and tariffs. So therefore, even though you could get the federal government of India to agree, it would still be a problem. Controlling tariffs is very difficult because there could be obstacles in there that are not quite as clean as just plain tariff taxes. But basically, you do have all sorts of people like we have. Our state government has taxes, our local government has taxes. Well, like there's sanctuary cities. Our federal government says you can't do with illegals, and obviously individual areas say we're going to. So if you were in tariffs, if they say, fine, the federal government isn't going to tax this particular item, but our state is going to tax it, especially a large state like California. It can be very complicated.
Well, this viewer says, Mr. Arnold, I thought that we have had a free trade zone with Canada. Why are we using tariffs with Canada?
Let's put it this way. That originally NAFTA was negotiated by President Bush. His, again, just as we decided in the world after World War II to help the whole world, we pretty much said, you can put tariffs on our stuff and we want to put it on yours. And that's what he said, we're this mighty America, we're going to help Canada, we're going to help Mexico. So therefore, this is a free trade agreement which says, you can tax us, we're not going to tax you. So overall, we've always had this benevolent thing that we're so powerful, we can support the world. In this case, we can support Canada and Mexico, but especially Mexico.
Well, Mr. Arnold, moving from the Western Hemisphere to the Eastern Hemisphere, we also have individuals who are wondering about tariffs in China. And this viewer has said, asked you, has China responded to tariffs in the past?
Obviously, China has responded aggressively. When we have increased tariffs on their goods, they have tended to increase tariffs on our goods. Even though it's not as much, It's like the biggest thing we sell to China is farm products, and farm products obviously can be bought from other countries. So they don't just necessarily raise tariffs, they just buy from somebody else. So but they also do put their tariffs up very high at times, yes, substantially.
Okay, thank you. We are going to take a break now, and we'll be back with the rest of Behind the Headlines right after this.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.
Welcome back to Behind the Headlines. And on this particular episode, we are meeting with Mr. Ed Arnold, who is the chairman of Susquehanna Valley Center for Public Policy. And on this particular Arnold report, we are focusing on tariffs and taking all your questions on tariffs, putting them together so that it's sort of like a video white paper, and that Mr. Arnold is giving a tutorial to all of us on tariffs today. We just talked about China and tariffs, Mr. Arnold. I was wondering if you could tell us about how's the United States doing vis-a-vis many other countries, our leading trading partners, in regard to tariffs?
Well, that's basically where we keep stressing China, but we have, with most countries in the world, a trade imbalance. In fact, when you look at it right now, China, as we've just said, we have a $300 billion deficit approximately. We also have close to that with Europe. We have a 235 with all of Europe, and the biggest one being Germany. Ironically, we do have some positive trade balances too. Just look at the bright side. For all reasons, which is a variety of goods, we have a $55 billion positive trade balance with Netherlands. We also have a small, like $10 billion positive trade balance with UK. But all the other European countries, we have a negative. There's a handful of other countries that we have small trade balances. Most of the time, Mexico, of course, is extremely bad. That's almost $200 billion trade imbalance. I mean, and there it's a big deal if we were to have fair trade with Mexico, Mexico would go into a depression. So basically Bush, who loved Mexico because he married a woman that was Mexican descendant, he basically gave the store away. And we have encouraged companies to go to Mexico. Trump is obviously pushing to have them build. In fact, right now there's a couple of auto companies that were going to build other plants in Mexico, and now they're going to build them in the United States. But China also, to get around our tariffs against them, have basically used Mexico as a transport where they do 90% of the work, send it to Mexico, Mexico does a little bit, and then they can stamp made in Mexico, and there's no tariffs. So that's a way to get around our tariffs. This transshipping is a very common thing. China uses aggressively, but so do other countries, that you trade with an intermediary company, which we have no tariffs against, and then ship it to the United States.
Much of the trade deficit with Mexico has to do with oil, and a lot of it has to do with American companies locating there to use cheap labor, and then they ship the goods back to the United States.
That's correct.
For example, Hershey Foods uses that system, among
Unfortunately,
others.
one of the things we were complaining about, fentanyl, that basically the components of fentanyl are sent by China to Mexico. Mexico mixes them and then sends it into our country. Now that's done illegally, but of course with our wide open borders that we had under Biden, it was flowed very easily. Mm-hmm. But basically the car industry is bigger there's a tremendous number of parts plants or total assembly is coming from Mexico. Again, we have no tariffs. Mexico, because we want to help their economy, well, now we're helping it at our own expense.
Okay. Well, here's another question on collection of tariffs. How are tariffs collected by the various governments around the globe?
It's pretty simple. I mean, that's what there are, I think there was a question which maybe we can answer now. There is pretty much two kinds of tariffs. They use different words, but one is a fixed rate, which is like if you were bringing in watches, a watch costs $10 or a watch costs $1,000, and you charge $1 a watch. That is, I don't think that's very common, but it is done. The most common is a percentage. When the bill comes in and the item's imported, you got the charge that the exporting company is charging the consumer in America, and you put a percentage on it. And that's what Trump's talking about, this 10% tax on the value of the goods shipped, which it's called ad valorem.
Okay. Well, what is the harmonized tariff schedule?
Well, basically, it's just a structure of coding. So therefore, if this particular item, let's say coal is item number 32 and computers are item number 332, instead of in your communications, you don't describe an item, you give its code number. So really, it's just a coding system.
Okay. Another question about terminology is this viewer would like to know what is, quote, customs value, quote, and how is customs value computed?
Well, customs value, again, is the invoice value. So really, it's just simply, it's the invoice of the item that's brought in. What is it being sold for?
Okay. More questions about terminology. What is ACE and what does it do?
ACE, which is administered by the United States, is an automatic commercial environment, which basically is just simply that we are the person that's keeping score. We're the bookkeepers. What is you're buying, you're selling, and we keep track of evidently all the countries in the world. We monitor world trade and record it.
The automated commercial environment. Okay. This viewer would like to know whether or not they will have to pay duties, if they will have to pay tariffs on internet purchases.
Well, basically right now in the world, America, again, United States, we have somehow come up with the number $800. Anything under $800 is too much paperwork, so there's no tariffs. So basically, if you're buying low-priced items under $800, you wouldn't have a tariff. Now, recently, because of Trump's negotiations, he has challenged it whether we should exempt China, because there's several very large Amazon equivalent type companies in China that have taken advantage of this, and they aggressively, everything they sell just happens to be under $800, so there's no tariffs. So basically, at this point, that's what the system is. It's just like when you travel overseas and you come. You don't have to declare what you bought overseas if it's below a certain dollar. They don't charge. There's no tariffs. But if it's above that, you got to pay tariffs. And this is the same thing. At this moment, I believe, except for with China, we have pretty much this $800 throughout the world. So if you buy anything on the internet under $800, you wouldn't have to pay tax. If it was over $800, you would.
Okay. Does Amazon make that clear when you're buying something internationally?
Well, Amazon wouldn't be involved. This is a company called K&M or something like that. They are selling it just like, it's not Amazon. Amazon does not, well, they obviously buy things overseas.
Right.
But this $800 rule that we're talking about is affecting a Chinese company, not Amazon.
Okay. This viewer wants to dig deeper into terminology and would like to know more about the 4 types of tariffs. This viewer asks you, what are the 4 types of tariffs? They're digging deeper into terminology, and this viewer would like you to please explain them. The 4 types of tariffs are specific tariffs, compound tariffs, ad valorem tariffs, and tariff rate quotas. Could you sort of slowly and clearly go through each one of them so our viewers can differentiate them and understand them?
Basically, again, the most common is the ad valorem, which of course is the third one you mentioned. That's a percentage tariff. Whatever the value of the goods is, you have a certain, this is Trump's talking about a 10% tax.
Okay.
Your composite tariff, that is a basically
Compound tariff.
Compound tariff is when you, part of it is fixed and part of it is ad valorem, so it's a combination that you compound the two together. Your specific tariffs, again, you haven't negotiated that you will charge a certain amount of dollars for this particular item, which is again a very, very specific as opposed to following the general rules. And then of course your other one is a fixed tariff, which means that you will charge a flat rate no matter what the value is, it'll be charged so much. Such as an example, watches, if they cost only 20 bucks, the tariff is still $1. If it costs $2,000, it's still $1. That's a fixed tariff.
Mm-hmm. Well, this particular question, a viewer digs deeper into trade law and asks you if the president and the U.S. Commerce Department, which keeps track of international trade, if they need to do a better job of explaining Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974.
Well, the Trade Act just pretty much says that we are going to have the right to investigate when we feel there's an unfair trade practice. And we can do all sorts of retaliations and so on. It pretty much gives us America with a clear-cut rule that anytime we feel that there's an improper trade situation, we can investigate it and we can act and retaliate in whatever way we see appropriate. Okay. It's basically, it just clarifies that, let's say our tariff laws.
Mm-hmm. Well, it seems like with the lack of understanding of economics on the part of many, that more clarification on all things economic and all things financial can only help and not hurt with the general public. Something that I wanted to mention was certainly the trade, the case for tariffs is very evident when you looked at what happened to the American commercial electronics industry in the 1970s. Here we find that Japan decided they were going to flood America with their electronics, and they were going to subsidize them so they could price them much lower than the electronics produced here in America, which were priced at market value of what it cost to produce them. And therefore, what did they do? They ran all of the American manufacturers of commercial electronics out of business. And so what we have in America today is primarily South Korean and Japanese commercial electronics. We're down to the last 45 seconds. Wondered if you'd like to wrap it up with us, or with some concluding thoughts about tariffs.
What Trump is trying to do is have, the word is fairness. We have fair tariffs. We no longer can afford to subsidize the world. You have tariffs, we have tariffs. They should be equal, they should be fair. It should not be one-sided as it is today. And therefore, I think Trump's approach to this, except that it is so complicated that that's why it's taking so long, that even if people want to have all the checks and balances in place and to make sure they are actually fair. And again, it's even a little complicated. If you're buying a lot of our foodstuffs, but we're buying all your manufacturing, that's apples and oranges. So you still, again, it's a very complicated field to make it fair and balanced. That's the challenge.
Okay. Well, we want to thank you for being with us on Behind the Headlines. We want to remind you to look at our website, and we want to remind you to please send in questions for Mr. Arnold for the next Arnold Report. And we thank you for being with us again, and we'll see you next time on Behind the Headlines.
Behind the Headlines is brought to you as a public service by the Pennsylvania State Association of Township Supervisors, the largest, most influential municipal association in the Commonwealth. Since 1921, PSATS has been preserving and strengthening township government and securing greater visibility and involvement for townships in the state and federal political arenas. Covering 95% of Pennsylvania's land mass, townships represent 5.5 million residents, more than any other type of political subdivision in Pennsylvania. Additional underwriting provided by the Worrell Corporation Foundation, based in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, by the Edward H. and Jeannie Arnold Foundation, and by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business. Behind the Headlines is also supported as a public service by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Visit pahighwayinfo.org.